Sloane Mercer had spent 7 years quietly standing by Julian Cross, giving him everything she could. And in those 7 years, she had loved him with every fiber of her being. At last, he accepted her presence at his side, and for a while she believed her devotion had been rewarded. But soon she discovered the truth that broke her heart into pieces. Julian had never truly loved her. His heart belonged to Vivienne Hale, the childhood sweetheart he had never let go of. He despised Sloane in ways she could not understand, convincing himself that every act of kindness she gave was meant to humiliate him, that the money she used to ease his suffering was nothing but a reminder of the distance between their worlds. After 10 years of a loveless marriage, he abandoned her, completely moving out to build a new family with the woman he had always cherished. Alone in the empty house, Sloane wasted away her body and spirit, fading until she finally met death in despair. Yet fate was cruel and merciful all at once, because when she opened her eyes again, she found herself transported back to the very day she had once chosen to help Julian. Only this time, she no longer carried the blind adoration of a young girl. This time, she remembered everything. She saw Vivienne throwing herself into Julian's arms, her tone dripping with provocation as she mocked. "Do you think money can buy everything? We don't need your pity." Sloane's lips curved into a faint, cold smile, her voice calm and sharp. "Is that what you want? Money, then perhaps I should burn it all just to prove to you that I will never help you again." Vivienne sneered louder, her eyes glinting with disdain. "You think a little wealth makes you superior? We don't want anything from you." As Sloane watched Vivienne clutch Julian's arm tightly, it felt as if she had stumbled into an old dream, a nightmare she had already lived once before. Her eyes drifted to Julian, to the boy he once was. His youthful face still refined and proud, even in his worn-out coat. His deep black eyes held that same cold starlight that could make the simplest clothes look like fine attire. She stepped back, her hand pressing against the edge of a table to steady herself, because the sight of him like that was something she had not seen in over a decade. Was it 10 years or 20? She could no longer remember clearly, because all of that belonged to her past life. Vivienne's taunts faded into nothing, her voice drowned by the flood of memories rushing through Sloane's mind. She remembered how it all began. How, despite Julian's pride and refusal to accept help, she had insisted on standing by him. She had loved him in silence for 7 long years, knowing every detail of his hardships. His father was a gambling addict who lost every penny and staggered home drunk, unleashing his rage on Julian and his mother. His mother could not bear the abuse, and in the end chose the river as her escape, leaving Julian to fend for himself from a young age. He survived by collecting scraps, by doing odd jobs, and later by relying on scholarships and stipends. He should never have had a chance at a future, yet, because of his extraordinary academic talent, he earned a place at one of the most prestigious private schools. That was where their paths crossed. Among the wealthy sons and daughters of privilege who treated education like a game, Julian was the only one who carried purpose in his eyes. He studied relentlessly, worked part-time after class, and no matter how little he had, he wore his poverty like armor, never letting it shame him. That fierce resilience was what captured Sloane's heart. She loved him because she could not stand watching him suffer. Still young and naive, she believed she could help him by giving him every beautiful thing she possessed, never realizing that he saw her generosity as a chain around his neck. On nights when he worked late and missed dinner, she would arrive with a lunchbox from her home. "Julian, this is beef stew our chef made, it's delicious. And foie gras too, my father had it imported. You should try it." She was the only daughter in a wealthy family, raised with affection and indulgence, simple in her thoughts and pure in her intentions. She wanted nothing more than to share her world with him. But he never wanted to take it. She never noticed the way his hand tightened around the lunchbox until his knuckles turned white. After a pause, he pushed it back into her hands and spoke with cold politeness. "Thank you, but I don't need this." The rejection stung, yet before she could reply, a boy from their group laughed and winked. "Julian, if you date Sloane, you'll never worry again. Take the chance while you can." Another voice chimed in, cruel and mocking. "Yeah, then your father can waste as much money as he wants. No need to leech off others anymore." Laughter erupted around the room, loud and cutting. The sneers filled the air, echoing like knives, until Sloane slammed her hand against the table and shouted with fiery anger. "Enough." Her voice silenced them all in an instant, the ridicule dying in their throats. The room fell still, but the damage had already been done. Julian shot to his feet, his expression carved in stone, and without another word he turned his back and stormed away. Sloane rushed after him, pressing the lunchbox into his hands again, desperate for him to understand. "Julian, don't listen to them. Eat, please. You still have work tonight, you can't do it on an empty stomach." But when he turned, what she saw in his eyes was not gratitude. It was contempt, sharp and merciless, and it froze her to the core. Yet as a young girl in love, her memory was short. She quickly buried the pain, forgot the way his gaze had cut her, and went on chasing him with the same devotion, blind to the truth that she was feeding a fire that would one day consume her whole. No one dared to laugh again. Julian Cross stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor, and without a word, he turned his back on the room. Sloane Mercer rushed after him, clutching the lunchbox to her chest, as if it were a fragile piece of her own heart, and tried to press it into his hands. "Julian, don't listen to them. Just eat, please. You still have to work tonight. How can you manage on an empty stomach?" He stopped suddenly, spun around, and the look in his eyes pierced straight through her. It was a gaze filled with raw disdain, even hatred, and for a moment she froze. But the memory of a young girl in love is a fleeting thing. Within days, Sloane had buried the sting of that rejection and returned to chasing after him with the same fervent devotion. She studied harder than ever, pushing herself so she could attend the same university as Julian. Her father was so delighted at her efforts that he increased her allowance, believing she was finally becoming serious about her future. But what her family saw as generosity only tightened the chains around Julian. Because of her wealth, he was denied the financial aid he once relied on, scholarships slipping from his grasp, and hardship stipends going to others in need. The days grew harsher. Sometimes he survived on nothing more than a single steamed bun from the cafeteria, washing it down with free broth to quiet the ache in his stomach. Sloane couldn't stand watching him suffer like that. Each time she offered help, he rejected her with the same coldness, but she could not give up. She watched him juggle 3 jobs, his body so exhausted he once collapsed on the street. That day, she snapped. She grabbed his arm and forced money into his hand. "Julian, why do you reject me like this? You work yourself to death. What is it all for?" She even went to his homeroom. Teacher pressing financial support into their hands under the guise of school assistance. To save his pride, she would invite him to eat with her, pretending she couldn't finish her meals and asking him to help. When they went out, she would insist she had discount coupons and coax him to join her. Slowly, painfully, Julian stopped resisting. Their lives intertwined, and step by step, she pulled him into her world. She funded his education, even extending her help to Vivienne Hale, the childhood companion who had grown up alongside him, thinking perhaps if she supported what mattered to him, he would smile at her the way she dreamed he would. After graduation, Julian began chasing his ambitions. He had always been brilliant, developing a gaming software with a friend during college, but raising capital proved impossible. Doors slammed shut again and again. Seeing his frustration, Sloane turned to her father and begged him to invest. That night, Julian sat beside her in silence, the weight of the world heavy on his shoulders. When her head began to droop against his arm, sleep pulling at her, he suddenly spoke. "Sloane, why are you so good to me?" Her answer was simple, without hesitation, as if the truth had always been carved into her heart. "Because I like you." She tugged playfully at his sleeve, adding softly, "Julian, do you like me too? I've given you everything and you're still not mine. You're really so heartless." She meant it as a joke, light and teasing, but Julian did not reply. His silence gave her hope, and she took it as his unspoken consent. And so they began a relationship, one she thought was finally the culmination of all her years of devotion. 2 years later, they were married. Their wedding was modest, almost bleak, because Julian insisted he despised noisy celebrations. The guest list included only her family and close friends. From his side, there was no one. After marriage, his coldness remained, but Sloane in her innocence believed it was simply his nature. She told herself that she had pursued him for years, that her love was enough to warm the ice around his heart. She never realized that his heart had never truly belonged to her. 3 years into their marriage, cracks widened into chasms. She could no longer endure his indifference. Her frustration boiled over, and one night she confronted him, her voice trembling. "Julian, do you still love her? Do you still love Vivienne?" He looked at her silent, his eyes like a wall of ice. That silence drove her mad. When he slammed the door and left without a word, something inside her broke. She began to spiral, clinging tighter each time he came home, demanding answers, shouting desperate for even a scrap of affection. And in her most furious moment, she snapped. "If I had known you'd be such an ungrateful man, I would have raised a dog instead. At least a dog wags its tail when it sees me." For the first time, she saw a flicker of anger flash across his face, but it vanished in an instant, replaced by calm indifference. After that night, he never returned home again. Later, she discovered the truth. Julian had long since been living with Vivienne, building a life with her, raising a child together, creating the family he had denied Sloane. Years passed and he flourished in happiness with another woman, while Sloane remained trapped in a hollow house, surrounded by nothing but silence and her own loneliness. The love Sloane Mercer once carried for Julian Cross had curdled into poison, seeping into every vein, every breath she took. His career soared, his fortune outgrew her family's wealth 100-fold, and she realized there was no way to strike back. The only thing she still possessed was a marriage drenched in sorrow, a marriage she refused to relinquish. She swore to herself she would never let go, never sign the divorce papers no matter how much money he offered. He had destroyed her, and she would not allow him to live in peace. The woman he loved would remain in the shadows forever, never to be acknowledged, never to step proudly into the light. His child would be condemned to live in secrecy, hidden like a shameful secret, never to be recognized as legitimate. Julian dared not file for divorce himself, knowing the scandal would shatter stock prices and send shareholders into revolt. And so they dragged their loveless bond for 10 long years, bound not by devotion, but by chains of resentment and pride. In those years, Sloane spiraled deeper into desperation. She raged, she wept, she begged, but Julian never once relented, never once set foot back into her home. Her health deteriorated under the crushing weight of despair. Thin, frail, and hollow, she eventually succumbed to illness. She died in grief, bitterness carved into her final breath. And then she opened her eyes. She was back staring into the face of Julian Cross once more. Hatred erupted within her chest, rising from the marrow of her bones, so sharp it made her body tremble. Her heart felt as though it would shatter from the sheer force of rage. In that instant, she nearly lost her balance. She had died once, and in dying she realized he had gotten everything he wanted. Perhaps his only aim all along had been to grind her spirit into the dust until she ceased to exist. She remembered clearly before her death her medicine had been switched. When she asked the housekeeper, they said it was only a milder version. She had not suspected a thing, but her health crumbled rapidly after that, until she no longer had the strength to rise from bed. It wasn't long before she was gone. Who else could it have been if not Julian? Who else could hate her enough to wish her immediate death? He had only wanted to clear the path for Vivienne Hale, the woman he adored enough to consign Sloane to hell. Looking at Julian standing before her, now Sloane's fingers curled with the urge to claw his throat, to end him here and now. She despised him with every ounce of her soul. She had never harmed him except for being young, naive, and far too mindful of his pride. Even their marriage had not been forced. She had asked him directly if he agreed, promising she would wait if he said no. Yet still he despised her. Then Vivienne's voice cut through, sharp and mocking, just as it had in Sloane's last life. "Sloane, do you think your money means you can do whatever you want? Who gave you the right to humiliate others like this?" Sloane's gaze shifted toward her. Vivienne was dressed in white, her delicate frame swaying like some fragile blossom. She was the very picture of purity, the woman Julian treasured above all else. He would sacrifice anything, even Sloane's life, to protect her. In her past life, Sloane had once told Julian that if he ever felt burdened, he could repay the tuition she had covered when he earned enough, and they would call it even. But Vivienne had twisted it, spitting venom that Sloane had used money as a weapon to belittle him. Only years later did Sloane realize that Julian truly believed it. Every argument, every cold silence stemmed from his conviction that her love was nothing more than charity disguised as scorn. Sloane let out a hollow laugh, her lips curling into a bitter smile. Vivienne clung to Julian's side, shielding him like a mother hen, while glaring at Sloane with self-righteous fury. Sloane tilted her head, her voice low but sharp enough to cut. "Is that what you want? If you see my money as humiliation, then I'll burn it. I'll never sponsor either of you again." Julian's expression darkened instantly, while Vivienne blinked in shock, her lips parting. "What did you say?" Sloane's smile widened, tinged with scorn. "You think my support was an insult? Fine. Then I'll stop. Go on, scrape by on your own wages. Let's see how far love alone carries you." The words struck like a blade. Vivienne's background was no better than Julian's. Her father had fled under a mountain of debt, her mother worked herself to exhaustion to keep her afloat, and sickness often confined her to bed. Perhaps it was this shared misery that bound her to Julian, the bond of two broken souls clinging to each other. But every time Sloane tried to join them, Vivienne would turn those pitiful eyes on her, whispering like a wounded child, "Sloane, do you hate me because I'm poor? Do you not want to be my friend because of it?" And before Sloane could even answer, Julian would step forward, pulling Vivienne behind him, his voice low and firm as if sealing her fate all over again. "If you think we're beneath you, then don't come along," Julian had said once. Yet still, Sloane found herself dragging Vivienne Hale along in their orbit. At dinners, Vivienne would sit close, her gaze lingering on the lobster laid out before them, eyes wide with barely concealed envy. "You get to eat dishes like this every day, don't you?" she murmured, her voice trembling with a mix of sadness and jealousy. "You really live in a world so different from ours." Time and again, whenever Sloane and Julian shared a moment of light-hearted laughter, Vivienne would insert herself with these pitiful little interruptions. And every time Julian's smile would fade, his mood darkening until conversation with Sloane fell silent. At first, Sloane thought Vivienne's words were merely careless slips. But then one day, as Julian turned to say something to her, Sloane caught the venom in Vivienne's eyes, hatred pure and unmasked, quickly disguised with a strained smile. A chill rippled down Sloane's spine. At last she understood. Vivienne didn't just dislike her. Vivienne loathed her. Yet there had been a time early in their marriage when happiness had seemed within reach. Julian had just landed his first major contract, and the company finally found its footing. At the celebration party, drunk and flushed with triumph, he pulled her into his arms and slurred with boyish enthusiasm, "Baby, tell me what you want. I'll buy you anything." She held him tightly, eyes brimming with emotion. "I don't need anything, Julian. Just give me your time and heart. That's all I want." But he had been stubborn, insistent, even in his haze. "A husband makes money for his wife to spend. I'll buy you the handbag you've always wanted. Pick one, any one." He fell asleep, still mumbling about how he would earn more, how she would never suffer again. The next day he followed through, buying her a bag before she could even protest. But before she had the chance to thank him, Vivienne appeared. Her eyes immediately locked onto the bag, her expression flickering with something sharp before she plastered on a radiant smile. She snatched it from Sloane's hands and cooed to Julian, "Oh, I remember this one. Isn't this the same bag some guy gave Sloane when she first came back from abroad? She said it was too cheap to wear in public, didn't she?" Sloane had forgotten such a trivial incident long ago. But Julian's face went cold instantly. He grabbed the bag from her hands and stormed out without a word. The next time she saw it, Vivienne was carrying it, smirking like a victor. "Julian gave this to me," Vivienne said sweetly, though her eyes gleamed with malice. "You don't mind, do you, Sloane?" Her patience cracked. She told Vivienne to return it, but the girl's eyes welled up with tears as she clutched the bag desperately. "You already have so many. Why do you have to fight me for just this one? You have everything, I only have this." Julian intervened, then his brows drawn tight as he yanked Sloane back. "Let it go. You already have too much, Sloane. Why take from her as well, or do you just enjoy stealing from others?" His words pierced her pride like a blade. Furious and humiliated, she fought back, and the argument escalated into a bitter clash that left their marriage fractured. Only later would she realize Vivienne had never cared about the bag at all. What she wanted, what she had always wanted, was Julian himself. To her, Sloane was nothing more than a thief who had stolen the man she coveted. Julian's grip on her arm tightened in that moment, his eyes clouded with torment. It was as if something inside him was unraveling, something he could no longer contain. His voice quivered when he asked Sloane, "Why did you help me? Was it because you truly loved me?" She recoiled at the wild glint in his gaze. It wasn't affection, it was obsession. His words echoed the very tone he once reserved for Vivienne, the same haunted cadence. In her past life, she hadn't yet pursued him at this point. He had always been aloof, untouchable, never smiling. Now he looked unhinged. She tried to pull her hand free, let go, but his grip only tightened, his eyes burning red with a frenzy that chilled her to the bone. "Sloane, do you love me? Do you—" This time, the raw intensity in his voice truly frightened her. She stared at him, shocked. "Julian, what's wrong with you? Have you lost your mind?" He didn't answer. His eyes locked on hers. wild and desperate, refusing to blink, refusing to let go as though her answer would decide the course of both their lives. Anger flared inside Sloane like wildfire. In her past life, Julian had humiliated her, belittled her, treated her like nothing. And now in this life, he dared to glare at her again, as if she had wronged him. She snapped, her voice sharp and merciless. "Do you really think I helped you just to mock you, Julian Cross? Or are you so shameless that you'd rather sit there and let me beg, feeding off me like a parasite, without the slightest ounce of shame?" Vivienne Hale's jaw dropped. She had never heard Sloane speak to Julian like that. In their past life, when Sloane was still hopelessly in love with him, every word she uttered was careful, delicate, designed not to bruise his fragile pride. But now she didn't care anymore. "Who do you think you are?" she spat, her eyes blazing with contempt. "A selfish ingrate rotten to the core. I can't believe I ever loved a man like you." Julian didn't rage as she expected. Instead, his face turned ashen, drained of color, as though the words had cut deeper than any blow. Sloane yanked her hand free and walked away without a backward glance, leaving behind a bank card loaded with $20,000, enough to cover his tuition and living expenses. Then she marched straight into a luxury mall. If helping him brought her nothing but insults, then she would spend that money on herself, indulging in handbags and clothes that brought her real joy. In her previous life, after that first handbag, Julian had never bought her a single gift. Anniversaries, holidays, milestones, he always forgot. Or perhaps it wasn't forgetfulness at all. Perhaps he had simply never cared. Meanwhile, Vivienne had transformed into a glittering socialite, flaunting the money Julian handed her, spending tens of thousands at a time on designer bags, watches, and clothes. And each time she made sure to wave her spoils in Sloane's face. "Look, Sloane," she would say sweetly. Holding up a purse, "Julian flew all the way to Paris just to buy this for me. Did he ever buy you anything like this?" Her mocking laughter cut like glass, each word rubbing salt into the cracks of Sloane's already crumbling marriage. But now Sloane no longer cared. She had money, she had power, and she no longer needed a man to buy her anything. So she spent $200,000 in one day buying 4 handbags and more. And fate, in its cruel humor, placed her right in front of Julian and Vivienne as she stepped out of the store, both arms weighed down with glossy shopping bags. Vivienne's eyes immediately darkened with barely veiled envy, her lips twitching as though the smile she forced was carved into her skin. She wore a threadbare white dress that had been ironed and trimmed to appear neat, but anyone could see it was cheap fabric sold on the side of the street. Her fists clenched at her sides as her gaze locked onto Sloane's designer haul. "Those handbags must be worth years of tuition," she muttered bitterly, her voice dripping with resentment. Then she clung closer to Julian, putting on her best air of fragile admiration. "We really don't belong to that world, do we?" Once Sloane would have wasted breath trying to explain, trying to soften the sting. But she wasn't that woman anymore. She smiled coldly, her words slicing through the air. "Now you realize how poor and pathetic you are. My apartment in Manhattan is 3,000 square feet. You live in a 30-square-meter dump outside the city. You think we could ever belong to the same world?" Vivienne's face drained of color, twisting with humiliation. Sloane stepped closer, her tone razor-sharp, every word dripping with venom. "You'll never belong in my world, Vivienne. You can rot in envy until it eats you alive." Vivienne flinched at the brutality of the words, but quickly turned to Julian, eyes glistening with fake tears, her posture trembling with manufactured fragility. Sloane laughed, her scorn ringing in the air. "All you know how to do is hide behind men. You're nothing more than an insect that survives in the shadows. And as for you and Julian, both of you are rotten to the core. Just the sight of you disgusts me." With those words, she turned and left her steps, light, her heart unburdened. She didn't say it for revenge. She said it because she was finally free. In her past life, she had suffered enough at their hands. This time, she wanted no part in their poisoned games. Whether they rose or fell, lived or died, it no longer concerned her. She had walked through hell once. This time she wanted a new life, a brighter life, one filled with people worthy of her heart. But just when Sloane thought she had escaped them, they reappeared like lingering ghosts. A friend came to her a few days later, laughing bitterly as he told her, "You cut off Julian and Vivienne's money, didn't you? They're pathetic now, can't even pay their tuition. Julian's been working himself half dead at part-time jobs, and Vivienne, well, she couldn't even buy a dress she wanted. She had only $80 left on her card, and when that wasn't enough, she sold the iPhone you once bought him just to scrape together tuition." At first, Sloane didn't even remember. Then it came back to her how in her past life, when Julian's phone grew old, she had surprised him with the newest iPhone. And the very next day, she saw it gleaming in Vivienne's hands. She lowered her eyes now and let out a cold laugh. So this was what they had become, pawning scraps of what she once gave them. She didn't make it far before Vivienne intercepted, her face twisted with fury. "Sloane Mercer," she snapped, "how could you abandon Julian like this? Do you even know his GPA is the highest in the department? He just won a scholarship. If he loses everything over tuition, will you take responsibility?" For a moment, Sloane simply stared. Then she laughed, sharp and incredulous rage sparking in her chest. In her past life, she had learned what they truly were, people who drained others dry while cursing them behind their backs. "What does his scholarship have to do with me?" she shot back. "Am I his father? His guardian?" Vivienne's eyes brimmed with practiced tears, her voice trembling as people began to turn their heads. "One of your handbags could pay our tuition for years, and yet you waste money on meaningless things instead of helping people who need it. Do you know how selfish you are? You'd rather spend on empty vanity than lift others up." Her tone was pitiful, but her words rang with venom, twisting the crowd to her side. Before Sloane could respond, her friend stepped forward, fury blazing. "What asylum let a lunatic like you out? If you want money, earn it yourself. Sell your labor, sell your time. Hell, even with your looks. I'm sure one night would get you a few hundred. Do that 10 times and you'll have your tuition. Don't stand here begging like a parasite." Gasps rippled through the bystanders, but the words hit like a hammer. "You've got hands, legs, a working brain. Why crawl to others for cash? Sloane isn't your father." Vivienne, so used to playing the sweet victim, faltered under the onslaught. For once she had no comeback, only wide eyes and trembling lips. And then the onlookers joined in. "They're right. If you don't have money, apply for aid. What an attitude, no shame at all. People like you deserve to stay broke." Vivienne's cheeks flushed red as she stumbled back a step, her eyes wide with shock. Sloane smiled coldly, knowing full well her friends would always stand by her. After all, she had treated them with kindness and loyalty for years. Vivienne, on the other hand, had no one but Julian. And right on cue, he appeared. Vivienne lit up at the sight of him, clinging to his arm like a drowning woman clutching a rope. "Julian, I only wanted Sloane to help you," she cried, her tears flowing freely now. "She has all this money for designer clothes, but won't spend a cent on you. I don't know what I did to make her hate me so much, but she humiliated me in front of everyone. Sloane, I know you despise me, but we truly admire Julian. He's so talented, so brilliant." Why can't you see that? Sloane's disgust curdled inside her. Vivienne reminded her of a slimy toad clinging to someone else's skin, not strong enough to bite, but irritating enough to sicken. And no matter how she tried to push her away, Vivienne clung tighter with her crocodile tears and her pitiful act. Then Julian's brows furrowed and he turned to Sloane, his voice sharp. "Did you really insult her?" Sloane burst into laughter, hollow and bitter. Of course. He was still the same. Every time Vivienne pretended to be the wounded flower, he never questioned, never sought the truth. He simply defended her without hesitation and turned his anger on Sloane. Some things never changed. In the past, moments like this would have left Sloane furious and heartbroken, fighting with Julian until her throat went raw, only to sneak into her room afterward and cry in silence. But those days were gone. She stared at him now with cool indifference and said plainly, "Yes, I insulted her." What she didn't expect was that this time, he didn't explode in anger. Instead, he lowered his head, his voice strangely gentle, almost pleading. "I'm sure she must have done something to upset you." Then he turned to Vivienne and said calmly, "Sloane is straightforward. Apologize to her." The words shocked Sloane to her core. Vivienne froze, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Julian, what are you saying?" His face hardened, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I told you to apologize." Vivienne's eyes welled with tears, her lips trembling as she stumbled back a step. "How could you say that to me?" Even Sloane was stunned. Julian Cross, the man who once defended Vivienne blindly, who once turned on her without hesitation, was now asking Vivienne to apologize. Had he lost his mind? For a fleeting second, an absurd thought crossed her mind. Could he have come back in time as well? But she pushed it away immediately. Impossible. In her last life, he had hated her so deeply, he drugged her, nearly destroyed her, nearly killed her. If he had really returned, he would have stayed far away. No, this was some new ploy, another mask he had put on. She stepped back warily, her eyes never leaving his face. Her words seemed to cut him open, his gaze filled with something raw, almost broken. "Sloane," he whispered, "I know I was wrong before. Can't you forgive me? You still love me, don't you? Please give us another chance. Every mistake I made, I'll make it right. I'll give you everything I failed to give before." His voice cracked as he spoke, and the more he begged, the more his emotions spiraled, until he was looking at her as if she were some priceless treasure he had just rediscovered. It was laughable, so laughable she nearly choked on her own breath. She clenched her fists tightly, nails biting into her palms. In her previous life, she had waited and waited, pouring everything she had into him, sacrificing her youth, her dignity, her dreams, just for the chance to hear these words. And yet she had died without ever hearing them. Now in this life, after she had humiliated him, dragged him through the dirt, he finally dared to say he loved her. What then did her years of sacrifice mean? Nothing. She let out a bitter laugh, her lips twisting with scorn. "Be with me, Julian Cross. Who do you think you are? This outfit I'm wearing probably costs more than what you'd make in 3 years of slaving away. You overestimate yourself. What makes you think you're worthy of me?" He had thought she'd insulted him before. He hadn't seen anything yet. This time she would show him what true humiliation felt like. As expected, Julian's face drained of color. He scrambled for words, desperation clawing at his tone. "I may not have money now, but just wait. One day I'll succeed. One day I'll be rich." He wasn't wrong in her past life. He had indeed become wealthy. But what did that matter to her now? Sloane's chest burned with loathing she could no longer contain. She looked him straight in the eye and spat. "Julian Cross, even if every man on this earth were dead, I would never choose you." She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving him frozen where he stood. He didn't chase her. He simply stood there, shoulders sagging, eyes hollow, as if his very soul had been stripped from his body. To anyone else, he might have looked pitiful. But Sloane felt only a cold, savage satisfaction. She knew him too well. This wasn't love. It was an act, a pathetic trick. Whether he had suddenly grown sentimental or gone mad didn't matter. The woman who had once loved him so fiercely, Sloane Mercer, had already died with the last life. In this one, all she had left for him was disgust. Without her support, Julian and Vivienne's lives were even more miserable than before. He couldn't sell his software. His attempt at starting a company failed spectacularly, and the two of them spiraled into poverty. Rumors whispered that they were so desperate, they had sold their own blood just to survive. Sloane heard it all, and she felt nothing. Their downfall was no longer her concern. The next morning, her phone buzzed. A name appeared on the screen, one she hadn't seen in over 10 years, Tristan Lake. She froze, staring at it. Back when she was with Julian, he had despised her wealthy friends, cutting her off from them one by one, until she stopped reaching out altogether. Tristan was one of those friends, someone she had known since childhood, someone Vivienne herself had once brought up while mocking the expensive bag Sloane had gifted him. Memories stirred as she pressed accept. Sloane Tristan's voice was warm, almost disbelieving, but full of excitement. "It's really you? Sloane, I heard you finally tore into Julian Cross." Tristan Lake's voice burst through the phone before she could even greet him. "About time someone put him in his place. That leech always thought he could control you. We all kept quiet back then, but we hated watching it." She smiled faintly, the corner of her lips twitching. "So what's this about tonight? 8 o'clock. The old spot. Don't you dare miss it." After the call ended, Sloane sat for a long moment, sifting through her memories, until she realized the old spot meant the bar they used to frequent together before Julian had entered her life. Back then, nights with friends had been easy, carefree. But once she had fallen for him, she had stripped herself down to nothing, throwing away her joy, piece by piece, to make herself small enough for him to tolerate. She had once loved shopping on Fifth Avenue, running her hands across the silk and leather of designer clothes. After Julian, she forced herself into discount stores, picking out $20 dresses so she wouldn't outshine him. She had loved fine dining, lingering over candlelit meals. With him, she limited herself to greasy diners, splitting fried dumplings on chipped plates. She folded herself into a shadow, shrinking her world until it revolved only around him, hoping if she made herself small enough, pliant enough, he might finally love her. She had loved him so much, she had bled herself dry. That night at the bar, Tristan welcomed her with open arms, a grin breaking across his face. He ordered rounds of drinks, pressing a glass into her hand. She didn't refuse. She let herself float for once, let the burn of liquor remind her she was alive. Her friends had not abandoned her, she realized that now. Especially Tristan. He had always been there, always telling her that if she ever felt wronged, he would deal with Julian himself. And he had kept that promise. The memory cut sharp and clear. She had just found out she was pregnant, then the result of one careless night when Julian had stumbled home drunk. Her heart had filled with hope. Perhaps the child could save what little remained of their love. But Vivienne Hale had discovered the truth, and she had arrived at their home one afternoon with that smug smile curling her lips. She had taunted, provoked, needled until Sloane, shaking with fury, had nearly struck her. And of course that was the moment Julian walked in. Instead of defending her, he grabbed her wrist and shoved her back. She fell hard, her stomach slamming against the edge of the table. Pain ripped through her body, blood blooming between her legs as she collapsed. At the hospital, doctors rushed to save the fragile life inside her. She had been young then, her body strong enough to cling to the pregnancy, but it was only temporary. Vivienne never let up. She showed up at their door every day, spitting venom, mocking her. She called in the middle of the night, forcing Sloane to listen to her moans. Julian's low whispers, the rasp of his breath as he told Vivienne to relax, to let go. The sounds had shattered her. Sloane had run to the bathroom, gagging, vomiting, until she collapsed against the cold tile tears and bile burning her throat. She had looked up into the mirror and seen a ghost staring back, a pale, hollow woman with bloodshot eyes and trembling lips. It was in those endless nights that she lost the baby for good. The doctor had told her to rest to avoid stress, as if that had been possible. When Julian finally learned the child was gone, he had been silent for a long time before saying flatly, "There will be others, but there were never others. Not for her, for him and Vivienne." Though there had been. They had built a family, a picture-perfect life. Tristan had exploded when he found out. He had stormed into Julian's face, fists flying until blood streaked Julian's mouth. "On your wedding day, you swore you would cherish her. You promised you would protect her. She used to be radiant, full of life, and you destroyed her." Julian hadn't fought back. He had only lowered his head, the metallic tang of blood dripping down his lips. Tristan, shaking with fury, had turned back to her, dragging her toward the bar. "Drink with me," he demanded, his eyes blazing. She had clinked her glass against his, downing shot after shot. The alcohol had burned, but compared to the acid in her chest, it felt almost merciful. After a few rounds, Tristan's face flushed red, his words slurring. He leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "Tell me, Sloane, do you really love that bastard?" Her gaze flickered over his face. He looked away too quickly, his ears tinged pink, his hands fidgeting on the table. A soft, bitter laugh escaped her lips. She had always known Tristan Lake cared for her far more than a friend ever should. But in her last life, there had only ever been Julian Cross, and it had destroyed her. I had even fought with Tristan Lake because of Julian Cross. Yet no matter how cold Julian had been toward me, Tristan had always stepped in to shield me. If I had to choose someone to walk beside me in this lifetime, I knew deep down it should have been someone like Tristan. Only now did I realize that love alone could not fix everything. Julian and I had been born into completely different worlds. His family had been fractured, broken, leaving him to build walls bristling with thorns around his heart. He had grown sharp-edged, suspicious, and cold. I, on the other hand, had been raised in warmth and affection, always ready to give. Always believing love would be enough. That very openness had been the reason for so many of my tragedies. I nodded faintly to Tristan, my voice low. "You're right, I was blind before." Tristan leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Then what about me?" His words trembled, hovering on his lips. But before I could answer, someone grabbed me, roughly yanking me away. Startled, I turned and met Julian's furious gaze. His eyes were storm dark, his body stiff, his jaw clenched as if holding back something dangerous. "You're coming with me," he growled, nearly dragging me through the door. "Let go," I shouted, shoving against him. "You're sick." But his grip only tightened, his strength terrifying. The man who had once been patient, who had once begged for my attention, now looked at me with a darkness that made my skin crawl. His voice dropped low and heavy, almost unbearable. "Sloane Mercer, what did you just say?" I froze, teeth clenched. "I said I don't love you. I was blind before." His laugh cracked through the air, twisted and hollow. He pulled me close, his breath hot against my ear. Say it again. The madness in his eyes made me falter. His voice rose raw and desperate. You once told me you loved me. You said you would never leave. You swore you'd stay by my side forever. Were all those promises lies? My heart slammed in my chest. How could he know? Those were the very words I had once whispered to him in another life before marriage, before everything collapsed. My whole body trembled. He shouldn't have remembered. He shouldn't have been able to. Julian seemed to realize his slip, and for a moment he stepped back, his face shifting with something unreadable. Julian Cross, I whispered, my voice breaking. You've come back too. What is it you want from me? He said nothing. The night air whipped around us, cold wind carrying dead leaves across the pavement, their rustling filling the silence with a hollow, desolate echo. Headlights flashed briefly, then disappeared back into darkness. I forced a bitter smile. How dare you? You came back after everything you did, after all the cruelty, only to stand here and claim you loved me. Do you think those words erase the years you destroyed me? Do you think they erase my death? Julian's face tightened. Sloane, listen to me. I came back because I finally realized it. I was a monster, but I've always loved you. I'll make it right this time. I'll make it up to you. Make it up to me. My hand cracked across his face before I even thought. Every ounce of rage, every shard of pain I had carried poured into that slap. Blood welled at the corner of his mouth, but he didn't flinch. He simply wiped it away and murmured calmly, Is that enough? If you still hate me, then hit me again. Hit me until your heart stops burning. His words sounded unyielding, but when I looked at him, his eyes were raw-rimmed red tears spilling down his face. My breath caught. In all the years I had known him, through every hardship, I had never seen Julian Cross cry. Not when his father gambled away every dollar he had scraped together, then beat him bloody for failing to provide more. Not when he worked 3 jobs at once, collapsing in exhaustion and his hands calloused and raw. Not when life itself had stripped him bare. He had always endured in silence, his heart like stone. But here he was weeping in front of me, tears mixed with the blood on his lips, his body trembling as if breaking apart. His voice cracked as he begged Sloane, Come back. Hate me if you must, strike me, kill me if it will ease your pain. Just don't leave me again, please. And in that moment, I nearly lost my mind. Julian Cross, has your mind completely snapped? What do you really want from me? My voice cut through the rain, sharp and trembling. He lowered his head, his words unsteady, cracking under the weight of everything he had hidden. I've always been insecure. Back then I was nothing but walls and barbed wires, convinced everyone only wanted to hurt me. I didn't dare love you, and I couldn't let myself believe you truly loved me. I was terrified that the moment I embraced it, the moment I allowed myself that joy, you'd look at me and say I wasn't worthy, that it was all a cruel joke. I was a fool, Sloane. I deserve every punishment you give me. Hit me, curse me, just please, please come back. He broke down, sobs tearing out of him like a dam bursting. Do you even know what life was like for me after you left? I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. Julian, you loved me the way you loved Vivienne, didn't you? You poisoned me, destroyed me all for her. Isn't that the truth? He froze. Don't pretend you don't know. I spat, gripping the icy railing to stop myself from slapping him again. My medicine was switched. I was recovering, I could feel it. But the more I took, the weaker I became until it was too late. Do you know what it's like to taste poison in your own mouth, to realize the man you loved was slowly killing you with another woman? Julian's voice broke. No, I never did that. I told the housekeeper to take care of you. How could I ever want you dead? His eyes locked with mine. And for a moment we both froze, stunned by the same realization. If it wasn't him, then the only one with access had been the housekeeper. But the housekeeper had always been loyal to Vivienne. It had been Vivienne Hale all along. She had wanted me gone. The thought should have shattered me, but instead it settled like cold iron in my chest. Did it even matter anymore who delivered the final blow? Whether Julian had known or not, he had still let her ruin me. My heart felt frozen, weighed down by exhaustion. Love or hate no longer seemed to matter. I was simply tired. All I want now is to leave you behind and live in peace. The autumn rain came suddenly, sheets of water pounding down, soaking us through. Julian stood motionless in the storm, his face indistinguishable between tears and rain. Sloane, please, he whispered. And what about Vivienne? I demanded, my tone sharp, my expression flat. You already have a child with her. What excuse do you have for that? His silence was suffocating. Finally, after what felt like forever, he muttered hoarsely, She drugged me. It happened once. Only once. I curled my lips into a bitter smile but said nothing. His head hung lower, his voice shrinking. From the beginning to the end, the only one I've ever loved is you. Before I could respond, a voice rose from the shadows slicing through the storm. Then what am I? Vivienne stepped into the dim light, her white dress plastered to her skin by the rain. Her eyes burned with a mixture of rage and madness. Julian, if you love her, then what about my child? What about me? I've stood by you all these years. What am I to you? Julian's fist clenched so tightly his knuckles whitened, his eyes burning not with love but with hatred. Vivienne hadn't changed at all. She was still the same venomous woman who had haunted me in the past. Even if she hadn't poisoned me, there would never be a way to undo what she had done. Her lips trembled as she asked, almost disbelieving, You hate me, Julian Cross. Do you truly hate me? His voice was ice. If it weren't for you tearing Sloane and me apart, none of this would have happened. Tearing you apart. Vivienne's laugh was hollow and cruel. You did that yourself. You were the one too insecure, too arrogant, too twisted. You wanted her, but you were terrified of losing her, so you pushed her away, then blamed me. You've always blamed me. His jaw tightened, veins bulging as his fury boiled over. Vivienne turned her gaze on me, her expression suddenly soft, almost innocent, though her words cut like knives. Sloane, you had everything, wealth, beauty, people worshipping you everywhere you went. Why did you have to take Julian from me too? She didn't wait for an answer. Her laugh rang out brittle and sharp against the thunder, a laugh that carried nothing but despair and venom. She stood there trembling with fury, her voice shaking with envy and resentment. You never had to fight for anything, Sloane. People handed you everything just for existing. You had beauty, wealth, adoration, and still that wasn't enough. Why did you have to take Julian from me too? He's all I ever had. Just him. So why did you have to steal him away? I kept my tone calm, though my chest burned. Julian is a man, Vivienne. He has the right to choose who he loves. I never forced him. And if you need the truth, I never really won. I lost, and I lost completely. Her eyes flickered with madness as she stepped closer. I caught the way her hands tightened behind her back, and a chill of dread crept over me. Before I could react, she pulled a knife from the folds of her dress and lunged. Her scream ripped through the rain, raw and hysterical. You have to die. Once you're gone, Julian will come back to me. The blade gleamed under the streetlight, the madness in her eyes reflecting off its edge. My body froze too slow to escape. In the split second before the steel could tear into me, a force shoved me violently aside. The sickening sound of metal piercing flesh was drowned by the storm. My breath caught as I turned and saw Julian standing between me and the knife, his body shielding mine. Blood poured from his abdomen, staining the rainwater crimson. He smiled weakly at me, his voice barely a whisper. As long as you're safe, that's enough. Chaos followed. Julian was rushed to the hospital, his body limp and pale as they wheeled him into the ICU. Vivienne was dragged away in handcuffs, her face twisted and unrecognizable as the madness finally broke her. 3 days later, Julian finally opened his eyes. His face was ashen, his body frail beneath the hospital gown, but he still tried to smile when he saw me. Sloane, you're safe. That's all that matters. Tears stung my eyes as I whispered, Why? Why would you throw yourself in front of me like that? His eyelids fluttered, his voice ragged. I don't know. I just couldn't let you get hurt. That knife had been meant for my heart. He had intercepted it with his own body. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to ask, What will you do now, Julian? He understood what I meant, and his weak smile trembled. I'll tell the truth. Nothing else matters anymore. And what about Vivienne? I pressed, sitting beside his bed. She was once your wife. She bore you a child. His lips curved faintly, but the sadness in his eyes betrayed him. Even so, she wanted you dead. I went silent. He coughed, pain racking his body, his voice breaking. Sloane, I know I was wrong. I know I destroyed everything. If I repent, will you give me another chance? No. My answer came before he could even finish. You saved my life tonight, but in another life, I died because of you. That makes us even. No more, no less. His eyes filled with tears, his hands shaking as he tried to hold on. But you once said you'd love me forever. A hollow smile tugged at my lips. Julian, love fades. You spent 10 years grinding my love down, piece by piece until there was nothing left. You killed it yourself. His face drained of color, panic flashing in his eyes. No, you can't mean that. It was you, Sloane. You were the one who said you loved me first. You can't take that back. I looked at him one last time before turning away. His body slumped against the sterile white sheets, fragile and broken. The boy I had once loved was still there in his eyes, but his soul had aged beyond repair. I whispered softly, though he might not have heard. Julian, I did love you once, truly, but that was another lifetime. As I stepped out of the room, I could still hear his sobs echoing behind me. Sloane, what am I supposed to do now? I gave up everything. I tried to start over, only to hear you don't love me anymore. Then what's left? What's the point of my life now? But my tears had long since run dry. They had been exhausted in another life, in another death. I walked away, leaving his cries behind me. This time I would not turn back. Julian never protected Vivienne again. She was sentenced to 7 years in prison for attempted murder and expelled from the academy. Her mother, unable to bear the shame, leapt from a building and ended her own life. I did not attend the trial. Even now I cannot fully understand why Vivienne hated me so viciously. Perhaps it was never truly about Julian. Perhaps it was about envy. She resented me for being born into wealth, for being admired, for having the world bend toward me without lifting a finger. And to prove to herself that she could win, she tried to rip the one thing she thought mattered from me. She tried to prove she could take Julian, but the truth was she never really had him. And in the end, neither did I. When Vivienne lost Julian entirely, she truly went mad. They said that when the news of her mother's death reached her, she lost whatever remained of her sanity, screaming curses at the judge, even during sentencing. That message about her mother had not come by accident. I had made sure someone delivered it directly to her, a final cruelty that mirrored the poison she had once slipped into my drink in another life. Some debts can never be forgotten. At last, she was paying back every ounce of what she owed. Trent's family valued our wedding deeply, and they made sure it was celebrated in grand style. The ceremony glittered with chandeliers, champagne, and the presence of every prominent figure in the city. It was everything respectable, everything magnificent, the kind of night society never forgot. As Trent and I stood together on the stage, hand in hand, the sudden arrival of his secretary sent ripples through the perfect picture. He rushed forward, holding a crimson envelope. "There's a cashier's check inside," the secretary whispered breathlessly. "2 million. We verified it. It's real. But there's no signature." Trent frowned, and I felt my stomach sink. We exchanged a look, each of us guessing the same name, Julian Cross. The man who had once burned down everything we shared, the man who had clawed his way back after failure and now found success again. Trent chuckled bitterly and muttered, so eager to buy his way back in. "Fine, let's accept it." At that exact moment, my phone buzzed in my hand. A message appeared from an unknown number, stripped of greeting or farewell, carrying only one line: "If he is not worthy of you, come back. I will wait for you forever." Trent's lips curled into a sharp smile when he glanced over my shoulder. "Then let him wait. He can wait for the rest of his life, because you will never go back." In front of him, I deleted the message and blocked the number. My heart felt strangely light. "Let's go," I said, softly slipping my arm into Trent's. "Everyone is waiting for us." Those nights of weeping and clawing through pain had finally receded into memory. I would never turn back again. From Julian's eyes, the story was darker. The first time he saw me again, he felt as though he were staring at a ghost. I had returned vibrant in my 20s, my face bright, my spirit alive, nothing like the haggard woman he remembered from years past. He had not believed the butler when he was told that I had died. Only when he saw my body pale and cold did the truth finally slice into him. It was strange. In that moment, he felt nothing. The room collapsed into silence, the world itself seemed to vanish, and all he could hear was the hollow space where my voice had once lived. By the time they helped him to his feet, he realized he had fallen, but he kept asking the butler, "Did she leave me any last words?" The answer was only a slow shake of the head. No, I had left nothing for him, and it made sense. When I had loved him, I had already given him every tender word I possessed. When our love soured, we had spared nothing in tearing each other apart, dragging out every insult, every venomous truth. I had once cursed him to die alone. He had sneered that I debased myself. We had used up all the words, all the passion, until there was nothing left to say. That was when his chest began to ache. Not a sharp stab, but a slow grinding pain, like cruel knives carving shallow wounds again and again, until his heart was riddled with holes. He could barely stand it, forced to his knees by the weight of his own grief. He looked at me one last time. Lying still on the bed, my face calm. Even in death, just as I had always been when he screamed at me. Even when the fights had been vicious, I had stopped long enough to ask after his health. That was who I had been, but not anymore. This time, I did not even grant him a single glance. I had left the world without a word, without forgiveness, without regret. He tried to convince himself it did not hurt, that his body and mind had detached, leaving his heart to bleed on its own. He even thought of work of the meeting scheduled for tomorrow. Maybe he should postpone, he thought idly. After all, there was a funeral to arrange. Then his throat burned. He coughed and spots of red bloomed across his shirt. Stunned, he stared at the stains. Whose blood was this? He thought wildly for a moment before the answer dawned. It was his own blood. The taste of iron filled his mouth as he spat a violent spray onto the floor. The butler panicked, crying out as he dragged him toward the hospital. But Julian's thoughts circled on only one truth. So this was what it meant to bleed for real. Even then, he had not shed a single tear for me. He returned to the house and began sorting through my belongings with a calm detachment that would have been mistaken for indifference. There was so little left of me. The closets were nearly bare, just a handful of simple clothes, no trace of the woman who once adored luxury. Strange, he thought, for someone who had always loved beautiful things. It was almost laughable. After everything, this was all that remained. Then he opened the drawer and found the bottles lined neatly in a row. Massage oils, dozens of them, all carefully ordered. He froze. Years ago, when he had worked in deliveries, he had been injured in an accident. On rainy days, his leg would throb with unbearable pain. I had searched for remedies, finally commissioning these oils to ease his suffering. He had mocked me back then, called it wasteful. And I had only laughed, my eyes shining as I told him, "Pal, what if one day you don't have them anymore?" The memory gutted him. After marriage, he had rarely come home. When he did, we fought bitter and loud. Yet here was proof that I had once cared enough to think of every ache he might endure. The bottles stood as silent witnesses, reminders of a love he had crushed beneath his own pride. And for the first time, the weight of it truly sank in. He had lost me, not just in life, not just in death, but entirely, forever. The bottles of ointment were barely touched, half a bottle at most. Only then did it hit me, once we actually had beautiful moments. Once I found Sloane Mercer unbearably charming. But endless quarrels, wounds that never healed, and years of resentment left us nothing but ugliness in each other's eyes. Something warm slid down my cheek. I touched my face, tears. I didn't even know when they had started falling. After Sloane's death, I thought I could forget her easily. I was wrong. Her shadow haunted me every night, slipping into my dreams, as if to mock me. She was 20 again, blushing as she handed me a lunchbox. "Julian, it's beef stew. My aunt made it. It's delicious." Back then, I only saw arrogance. Now, replaying it in my mind, her flushed face seemed unbearably sweet. That was her favorite dish, her comfort food. And she had shared it with me freely, as if offering the purest part of herself. I never deserved it. I was too insecure, too fragile. I wrapped myself in thorns and cut anyone who dared come close. She came from privilege, beauty, adoration. How could I believe she truly cared for a nobody like me? I convinced myself she was only toying with me. And so I treated her cruelly, hoping she'd leave. But she never did. She stayed, like some rare creature who wandered into my darkness, refusing to turn away. And I, pathetic as I was, both wanted her gone and desperately needed her to stay. When we married, things seemed to ease, for a while. Then Vivienne Hale kept whispering poison that Sloane and I lived in two different worlds, that I'd never be enough. And she was right. The gifts Sloane's admirers had showered her with I could never compare. I told myself I hated her. But each time I found myself drawn closer, testing her patience, wounding her again and again, just to see if she still cared. At night, she returned in my dreams, twisted and broken, holding a faceless child in her arms, weeping in despair. "Julian, give me back my baby." I'd wake in terror, unable to sleep, her voice echoing in my skull. Desperate, I went to a monk. Master, can you help me let go? Should I build her a shrine, pray for her peace? The monk looked at me for a long time, sighed, and pressed his palms together. It is not her you must release. It is yourself. And in that moment, I understood. The chains were mine. The weight was mine. I had loved her all along. 3 years after Sloane Mercer's death, madness claimed me. I ignored Vivienne. I rejected the child she shoved into my arms. On the anniversary of Sloane's death, I swallowed pills with whiskey and slashed my wrists. As the pain dulled, a breeze drifted in sunlight, warmed my face, and I heard birdsong. Then, a hand. Soft, warm, I turned. Sloane, 20 years old again, stood smiling at me, radiant, untouched by sorrow. Julian. She laughed softly. What took you so long? Tears blurred my vision. I pulled her into my arms, desperate, crushing her against me. You're hurting me, she whispered, then giggled, wrapping her arms around me. Julian, what's wrong? Did you miss me? Yes. My voice broke. Sloane, I missed you. God, I missed you. If only time could freeze in that moment. If only I could hold her there forever. But the illusion shattered. Her voice, once sweet, now cruel. I don't love you anymore. The words gutted me, tearing me open. I screamed, convulsed, sobbed until my throat was raw. If I had known it would end like this, why hadn't I held on to her when I had the chance? I thought I could fix everything. Instead, I had lost her completely. And so I learned the truth. Death was not the real ending. The true ending came the moment Sloane Mercer walked out of my life forever. The rest of my days would be nothing but a prison of despair, one I could never escape.